Top 10 Amazing Facts Behind Death. Aretha Franklin. What really happened? Aretha Franklin. The Queen of Soul passed away, but what happened behind the scenes in her final days may shock you. Secrets, premonitions, and cryptic messages have surfaced, painting a picture of a woman who seemed to know her time was coming. From hidden wills to mysterious phone calls, Aretha's death was filled with unanswered questions. What truths are still buried, and why was she so secretive about her health and personal life? Stay tuned and let's uncover the shocking details. Like, comment, and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more deep dives into the lives of music legends. When Aretha Franklin passed away, it felt like the soul of America let out a long, aching sigh. For millions of people who grew up with her voice as the soundtrack to their lives, her death marked more than just the loss of a legendary career. It was the end of an era. Aretha was more than just a singer. She was a companion through joy, heartbreak, struggle, and triumph. Her voice was heard in kitchens, in churches, on long road trips, and in those quiet, personal moments when no one else seemed to understand, Aretha did. Now, with her passing, many questions remain unanswered about the final chapter of her life. This story isn't just about death. It's about the untold truths, the shadows, and the powerful moments behind the Queen of Soul's final goodbye. In her final years, Aretha Franklin spoke of her approaching death in ways that seemed less like casual reflections and more like premonitions. She had quiet conversations with close friends and family where she remarked that she was getting her house in order. While this may have sounded like an ordinary statement about life, those who knew her well felt it carried a much deeper meaning. It seemed that Aretha, with her deep connection to music and her spiritual roots, was aware that her time on earth was running out. Aretha's final performances were eerily telling. One of the last songs she performed was "I Say a Little Prayer," but it was unlike any rendition she had ever given before. Her voice, usually filled with power and energy, took on a slow, contemplative tone that made listeners feel something much deeper. Many fans who were present described it as a farewell wrapped in melody. It was as if Aretha knew this was her last chance to speak to the world, and she did so through her music, leaving a legacy of emotional depth and vulnerability that few could have anticipated. Even Stevie Wonder, one of her closest friends, and the last people to speak with Aretha before her death, described their final conversation as spiritually intense. According to Wonder, Aretha calmly told him, "I'm at peace." This peaceful acceptance was especially poignant considering her ongoing battle with pancreatic cancer and the family turmoil surrounding her estate. To many, this statement seemed to suggest that Aretha had already made peace with what was to come, as though she had seen the end and embraced it before it even arrived. For years, Aretha Franklin fought a quiet battle with pancreatic cancer, and yet to the public, there was no sign of the battle she was enduring. The world only learned that she had been diagnosed with a neuroendocrine tumor, a rare and often misunderstood form of pancreatic cancer, when it was too late. This form of cancer often has subtle symptoms, allowing it to remain hidden for years. Its slow, unpredictable progression meant that Aretha's condition could have been deteriorating without the immediate visible symptoms seen in other types of cancer. Aretha had always been a private person, but her decision to keep her diagnosis largely out of the public eye was puzzling. Even though she was a beloved public figure, she chose to endure her pain in silence, perhaps to avoid the pity of others. This stoic decision matched her overall approach to life, always composed, always in control. She had survived many personal and professional storms, emerging with her dignity intact each time. Illness, it seems, was just another private burden she was unwilling to share with the world on her terms. Her decision to keep her diagnosis hidden fueled even more speculation, and it became clear that Aretha's refusal to publicly address her health wasn't about protecting her image, it was about controlling her narrative. Even when journalists and family members sought clarity, they were met with conflicting stories. Some claimed she had overcome the disease at one point, while others admitted she had been in decline for years. The lack of transparency regarding her medical condition only added to the mystery, with some believing that Aretha herself was in denial, while others suggested she was shielding her loved ones from the truth until it was absolutely necessary. After Aretha's passing, a bizarre and confusing saga unfolded regarding her will. 3 different versions of Aretha's will were discovered, and each one painted a different picture of her final wishes. The first will, dated 2010, was formal signed and locked away in a cabinet. The second, a handwritten version from 2014, was found stuffed between the cushions of her living room sofa. Finally, a third, will dated 2018, emerged in a partially torn condition, raising even more questions. Each will named different executors, and the distribution of her assets was varied, causing a storm of legal confusion. Aretha's 4 sons, Clarence Edward Kickoff and Teddy, were thrust into a chaotic legal battle. Their mother's wishes seemed unclear, and the family's grief over her death turned into a public dispute. No one knew for sure if Aretha had trusted the written documents over the formal contracts, or if she had changed her mind over time. It became clear that Aretha had always been fiercely private, even about the most intimate parts of her life. Whether she had intended for her handwritten words to be the last will or had simply changed her mind remains unknown. What's certain is that her final act wasn't a musical performance. It was a puzzle, one that still remains unsolved. In the final days of Aretha's life, she made several phone calls that left a lasting impression on those who received them. These weren't just goodbyes. They were charged with something deeper, perhaps a sense that her time was running out. One of the most memorable calls came from Stevie Wonder, who visited Aretha in her Detroit home. However, it was the phone call after the visit that stuck with him the most. Aretha, speaking softly, told him, "Thank you for the music." It was a parting message that seemed final, leaving Wonder with the overwhelming feeling that he wouldn't see his friend again. Another significant phone call came from Jennifer Hudson, the actress Aretha had chosen to portray her in an upcoming biopic. Instead of offering advice or discussing the film, Aretha simply told Hudson, "Sing it like it's the last time." Hudson, who was deeply shaken by the call, later admitted that it felt like Aretha was saying goodbye, but in a way that was only understood by those who knew her well. These conversations, though seemingly ordinary, were filled with an emotional weight that spoke volumes. They hinted at Aretha's awareness that she was nearing the end, and perhaps in her own way she was trying to say goodbye to the world through the people she loved. Aretha Franklin's funeral was a grand event, one befitting a woman of her stature. Celebrities, politicians, and musical legends filled the pews of Greater Grace Temple, and gospel choirs sang in her honor. The ceremony was both emotional and respectful, paying tribute to the life and legacy of the Queen of Soul. However, amidst the pageantry and celebration of her life, something unusual occurred that caught the attention of many attendees. 2 men dressed in conservative black suits appeared at the front of the church during the service. They arrived early, sat quietly, and refused to engage with anyone around them. Their presence was almost ghostly, and no one could identify who they were. They didn't speak to anyone and didn't interact with the family or the other guests. By the time the final hymn played and the service came to a close, they were gone, having disappeared as quietly as they had arrived. This strange occurrence fueled rumors and theories. Some people speculated that these men might have been government agents, especially given the history of Aretha's connection to the civil rights movement and her vocal stance on social justice. Aretha had always been an outspoken advocate for racial equality, and her activism made her a target for surveillance by government agencies, including the FBI. Indeed, documents released years later revealed that Aretha Franklin had been under FBI surveillance for over 4 decades. The government had tracked her performances, associations, and political leanings, all due to her activism. The presence of these mysterious individuals at her funeral therefore seemed to align with the long history of surveillance that Aretha had faced throughout her life. Were these men there to mourn her, or were they sent to observe, ensuring that no hidden truths were uncovered? This eerie presence at her funeral only added to the growing sense that there was much more to Aretha's story than the public had ever known. While many fans and loved ones were grieving the loss of a musical legend, it seemed that some were more interested in keeping watch over her legacy. What secrets might these agents have been trying to protect or conceal? The fact that they were not on any guest list and had no obvious connection to the family or the entertainment world only deepened the mystery. Perhaps in death, Aretha Franklin was still a woman of significance, whose legacy held power beyond the world of music. Her death, it seemed, had become part of a much larger narrative, one that intertwined with the political, historical, and social fabric of America. And the strange, unsettling feeling that lingered at her funeral suggested that Aretha Franklin's story was far from over. The shadows of her life seemed to stretch even further than anyone could imagine, hinting at forces at play far beyond the music industry. The lingering question remains, what could be so important about Aretha's life and death that even after her passing, government agencies felt the need to watch over her? Was she still a threat to the system, or was she merely a figure whose legacy and message continued to challenge those in power? Only time may tell what secrets remain hidden in the legacy of the Queen of Soul. Long before Aretha Franklin became a global musical icon, she had already drawn the attention of the U.S. government. In the 1960s, during the height of the civil rights movement, Aretha was deeply involved in advocating for social justice and racial equality. Her powerful voice and public support for activists like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put her at the center of a cultural revolution. While her music touched millions, her political activism made her a target of the FBI. The government's surveillance of Aretha Franklin began as early as the 1960s. The FBI, under the direction of J. Edgar Hoover, was concerned with any public figure who might challenge the status quo, and Aretha, with her influence, was seen as a potential threat. The Bureau kept files on her for decades, tracking her concerts, monitoring her associations, and even speculating about her involvement with what they considered to be radical groups. These FBI files were not released to the public until after Aretha's death, shedding light on a hidden chapter of her life. The documents included reports that were coded, heavily redacted, and vague in their descriptions. While no substantial evidence was ever found to link Aretha to any illegal activities, the very fact that she was under surveillance speaks volumes about the power she wielded not just as a musician, but as a cultural figure who dared to speak out against injustice. Aretha's activism, combined with her fame, made her a symbol of resistance for many African Americans. Her voice wasn't just a tool for entertainment, it was a weapon in the fight for civil rights. Through her music, she conveyed messages of empowerment, liberation, and equality, and it was precisely these messages that made her a target for the FBI. The agency's surveillance of Aretha Franklin was in many ways an acknowledgement of her influence, an influence that transcended the music world and resonated deeply within the political and social movements of her time. Despite the extensive monitoring of her activities, Aretha continued to live her life with dignity and courage. She never allowed the government's scrutiny to deter her from speaking out or using her platform to champion causes she believed in. But the constant surveillance must have weighed heavily on her, especially considering the climate of fear and suspicion during the civil rights era. While the public saw Aretha as a musical legend, the government saw her as a figure who had the potential to stir unrest and challenge the established order. Even after her death, the legacy of Aretha's activism continued to be a subject of debate. Some argued that the FBI's actions were a reflection of the fear and suspicion that accompanied the civil rights movement, while others believed that Aretha's activism was still a threat to the status quo, even in death. The question of whether the FBI's surveillance impacted Aretha's personal life and the way she lived remains unanswered, but it is undeniable that her life was shaped by forces much larger than herself. Her story was not just about music. It was about a woman who used her voice to stand up for those who had been silenced for too long. Aretha Franklin's legacy, both musically and politically, will continue to inspire future generations. She was a woman who used her platform to fight for justice and equality, and her death served as a reminder that some legacies are too powerful to be erased even by those in power. Long before Aretha Franklin became the iconic figure known worldwide, her life was marked by a deeply personal and often overlooked chapter. At the age of 12, Aretha became a mother. She gave birth to her first child, a daughter whose name and the circumstances surrounding her birth remained a closely guarded secret. This event, which took place when Aretha was still a child herself, was never publicly discussed by the singer during her life, adding another layer of mystery to her legacy. Despite her openness about many aspects of her life, including her struggles, triumphs, and career, Aretha was incredibly private about this particular part of her past. The details surrounding her daughter's birth have rarely been discussed, even in biographies or interviews. This silence was puzzling to many who wondered why she chose not to acknowledge her child publicly, especially given that she was so forthright about other areas of her life. Some close to Aretha speculated that her reluctance to speak about her daughter was due to the trauma and emotional complexity surrounding her early motherhood. The birth of a child at such a young age, when Aretha herself was still a child, must have been a life-altering experience. Yet this chapter was never fully explored in the public narrative of Aretha's life. The mystery surrounding her daughter remained intact, and Aretha never allowed it to become a part of her story in the way that other aspects of her life, her music, her activism were. There were those who believed that Aretha kept this part of her life hidden to protect her daughter from the harsh spotlight that inevitably came with being in the public eye. Aretha, known for her fierce desire to control her narrative, might have wanted to shield her child from the pressures of fame and the judgment that often accompanies it. Some people suggested that Aretha's decision to remain silent about her daughter was not one of shame, but of love and protection, wanting to keep this aspect of her life private for her child's sake. In the final years of her life, Aretha reportedly reached out to relatives she hadn't spoken to in decades, rekindling old relationships and attempting to reconcile with people from her past. Whether or not her daughter was among those she sought to reconnect with remains unclear. But the weight of a lifetime spent carrying this untold story, one born out of pain, secrecy, and perhaps love, undoubtedly shaped the woman Aretha became. This unspoken chapter in her life is just another example of how she guarded certain parts of herself with fierce intensity, even as she shared so much of her soul with the world through her music. The mystery of Aretha's daughter continues to fuel speculation. Was this part of her life too painful for her to revisit? Or did she simply choose to keep it private as she did with so many other aspects of her personal life? What we do know is that the Queen of Soul wore many crowns during her life, but some burdens, like the story of her daughter, she bore in silence. Perhaps, as with many of her life's most intimate details, Aretha Franklin wanted to keep this part of her history just for herself, offering only glimpses of it to the world. In her final years, perhaps she was finally able to find some peace in confronting these old wounds, but that is a story that remains untold. In her final moments, surrounded by only a few trusted caregivers, Aretha Franklin found the strength to whisper one last truth that would resonate deeply with those who were present. As her breath grew shallow and the light behind her eyes began to dim, she turned toward the window and said, "Music is life, and I will sing even if I can no longer breathe." These words, soft yet powerful, were a reflection of who Aretha truly was. Music had been her lifeline, her outlet, her voice for so many years. Even as she faced the end of her life, her connection to music remained unwavering. Her final vow to sing, even when she could no longer breathe, spoke volumes about the way she lived her life. Music wasn't just a career for Aretha. It was her essence, her identity, her reason for being. The caregivers who witnessed these final words recalled how they were moved to tears by the simplicity and depth of her statement. It wasn't a grand farewell filled with dramatic speeches or orchestrated fanfare. Instead, it was a quiet, intimate moment that encapsulated Aretha's life and legacy. Even in her weakest state, she remained devoted to the thing that had defined her and given her strength, her music. Her final moments weren't filled with fear or regret, but with the unwavering devotion to the one thing that had always been a constant in her life. These words were more than just a final declaration. They were a testament to Aretha's resilience. She had lived through personal battles, professional struggles, and public scrutiny, but music had always been there providing solace and strength. And in her final hours, It was music that gave her the peace she needed to face the inevitable. Aretha Franklin's last words were not just a reflection of her love for music. They were a final tribute to the power of music to heal, inspire, and transcend even the boundaries of life and death. Her death, though filled with sadness, also serves as a reminder of the immense power of music in shaping our lives. Aretha Franklin's voice may have faded, but the echoes of her music continue to resonate in the hearts of those who heard her sing. Her final vow to music wasn't just an expression of her love for the art. It was her way of ensuring that her legacy would live on long after her last note was sung. Among the many unreleased recordings Aretha Franklin left behind, there is one song that stands out, a song that no one outside of her inner circle has ever heard. This song, titled "One More Prayer," was reportedly recorded during one of her final private studio sessions just months before her death. Unlike her other works, there was no announcement or fanfare surrounding this recording. It wasn't part of an album, and no official press release accompanied it. It simply remained hidden, tucked away in a vault, waiting to be released. Those who have heard the song describe it as haunting, stripped down to its bare essentials. There is no orchestration, no elaborate production, just Aretha's voice accompanied by a simple piano. The song has been described as a farewell not just to her fans, but to life itself. There is a sense of finality in the song, a sense that Aretha knew this was her last opportunity to share something with the world. The mystery surrounding "One More Prayer" has only deepened the intrigue surrounding Aretha's death. Some family members have confirmed the existence of the track, but no official decision has been made about whether to release it. Some believe that Aretha's wishes should be respected, and the song should remain private, a final piece of her legacy that belongs only to those who were closest to her. Others believe that the world deserves to hear this final message from the Queen of Soul, especially given the raw emotion and intimacy it is said to convey. The debate over whether or not to release "One More Prayer" continues to this day, and it has become a symbol of the complex nature of Aretha Franklin's legacy. Was this song her musical will, her final confession to the world? Or was it a quiet, personal goodbye that she never meant for the world to hear? The fact that it remains locked away in a vault known only to a select few adds to the aura of mystery surrounding Aretha's death. In many ways, "One More Prayer" represents the unspoken parts of Aretha's life, the moments she kept hidden, the feelings she never fully shared with the public. It is a reminder that even the most public figures have private parts of their lives that remain shrouded in secrecy. Whether or not the world will ever hear "One More Prayer" is uncertain, but one thing is clear. Aretha Franklin's final gift to the world may very well be a song that continues to live in silence. The death of Aretha Franklin was a monumental loss, not just for the music world, but for the entire cultural fabric of America. Known as the Queen of Soul, her voice moved people across generations, transcending borders, races, and backgrounds. But even in death, Aretha's legacy continues to echo through the generations, her influence still deeply felt, not only in the realm of music, but in the broader social and cultural landscape. The mystery surrounding her final years, her secret battles, cryptic farewell messages, and the unresolved details of her estate only serve to deepen the legend of Aretha Franklin. Aretha's music, of course, is what most people remember her for. With hits like "Respect, Think I Say a Little Prayer" and "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman," she became the voice of empowerment for Black women and the soundtrack to countless personal moments. Her powerful renditions of gospel music, rooted in her religious upbringing, redefined the genre and influenced future generations of artists. But beyond her vocal prowess, Aretha Franklin was a symbol of resilience and strength. She rose from humble beginnings in Detroit, the daughter of a famous preacher, to become a global icon. She broke barriers for African-American women in the music industry, earning respect not only from her peers, but also from the political and cultural elite. But Aretha's impact wasn't limited to music alone. She was an activist, an unapologetic advocate for the rights of Black people and women. Throughout the civil rights movement, Aretha used her platform to speak out against racial injustice, embodying the spirit of resistance in a way that few artists did. She performed at rallies and used her voice to advocate for the marginalized, standing in solidarity with leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. She was also a trailblazer in her industry, becoming one of the first black women to perform in venues like the Fillmore and Madison Square Garden. Her influence was so immense that she was a trusted ally to those seeking equality in both the political and artistic spheres. Aretha's ability to transcend her personal struggles and maintain her public persona as an unwavering force of nature was something that fascinated her fans. But as we now know, her private life was far more complicated than the public ever realized. The secrets she kept, the hidden medical diagnosis, the mysterious wills, the cryptic final phone calls reveal a woman who, despite her larger-than-life persona, struggled with the same human frailties that we all do. The fact that she kept so many aspects of her life private has only fueled the curiosity surrounding her. Why did she keep these parts of herself hidden? Was it to protect her image, her loved ones, or simply to maintain control over her own story? In her final years, Aretha seemed to be organizing her life and legacy in a way that gave her peace, preparing for an inevitable end in a manner that many might never have guessed. The quiet dignity with which she handled her illness and the eventual chaos surrounding her death and estate shows the complexity of the woman behind the legend. It is in these final unspoken moments that the world was reminded of Aretha's profound humanity. She was not just a voice, but a woman who lived a life filled with contradictions, secrets, and triumphs. Even after her death, Aretha's influence remains unrivaled. The untold parts of her story, her struggles with illness, family conflicts, and untapped artistic creations continue to be a subject of fascination for her fans and historians alike. There's a lingering feeling that there is still much more to learn about her life, and perhaps that's what keeps her legacy alive. Aretha Franklin was more than just a famous singer. She was a cultural force, a pioneer, and an inspiration to all who heard her voice. The unanswered questions about her final days may never be fully resolved, but they only serve to elevate the mystery and magnitude of her story. As the years go by, Aretha's legacy will only continue to grow. Her music will forever be a part of the American cultural landscape. Her activism will continue to inspire future generations of leaders, and the stories of her final years, both those that are known and those that remain hidden, will keep her memory alive. In a world where many of her contemporaries have faded into obscurity, Aretha Franklin's legacy remains as powerful as her voice. She is and will always be the queen of soul and icon whose influence will never be forgotten. Aretha Franklin's legacy is far more than her powerful voice and unforgettable music. Her quiet strength, resilience in the face of personal struggles, and dedication to social justice left an indelible mark on the world. Yet even in death, the mysteries surrounding her final years continue to fascinate us. What do you think lies behind the untold stories of Aretha's life? Should we seek to uncover more about her hidden battles, or is her music enough to define her legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us at Legends of Black Excellence for more captivating stories.